So, like so many, I have been fascinated with space travel as long as I can remember. I am a Gen Xer who grew up on Star Wars and Star Trek and know they aren't in conflict with each other. And though the Apollo missions ended 2 years before I was born, you can do the math, I was captivated by the space shuttle program. Of course, it didn't hurt that Houston was my hometown, and I do remember a field trip to NASA back in the days where we could watch the astronauts rehearsing in one of the world's largest swimming pools. So it was with both excitement and, I will admit, a bit of trepidation that I watched the Artemis II launch. It happened to be that it was Erev Pesach, so we had it on the big screen TV as we were just getting ready to eat some matzah. Now, I held my breath through the first 73 seconds, hoping and praying that this group of our 4 fellow Gen Xers would successfully slip the surly bonds of Earth. For those of you keeping track, the Challenger disaster was now 40 years ago this past January. Like so many in my generation, I remember that day vividly. I was in Mrs. Ivy's 5th grade English class where we all gathered to watch the launch, including teacher Sharon Christy McAuliffe, go up under the Teacher in Space project, only to witness the explosion that claimed her and her fellow 6 astronauts' lives. Believe it or not, NASA had originally considered sending up Carol Spinney in his Big Bird costume as a way of engaging children with NASA. However, the 8-foot 2-inch puppet simply would not fit into the cockpit of the space shuttle. I can't even imagine what that would have done to us. Thankfully, assuming all goes well, Artemis II Orion capsule will be splashing down in the Pacific Ocean less than an hour from now. It has been really incredible to watch this journey in a way that has never before been presented. From the continued live stream to the incredible images to the video of Nutella floating along in the background, there will be much to be processed as NASA continues to plan humanity's eventual return to landing on the moon. However, that being said, one cannot still help but remember those who died in the cause of space exploration, including the astronauts of Apollo 1, the Challenger, and Columbia, just to name a few. This week, we'll be reading from Parshat Shmini. It begins with the ordination of Aaron and his sons, who will serve the entire Israelite community as the heads of the sacrificial cult. This is immediately followed by the tragic tale of Nadav and Abihu, Aaron's 2 oldest sons, who in their zeal offered up an inappropriate sacrifice that was not requested of them. According to the text, quote, "Fire came forth from the Eternal and consumed them, thus they died at the instance of the Eternal." There are a handful of midrashim, a handful of rabbinic stories that attempt to explain the unexplainable, including one that argues how Nadav and Abihu were really trying to supplant the authority of Aaron and Moses, while another suggests that they were drunk and in their inebriated state acted in ways that violated the sanctity of the Mishkan, the tabernacle. Following this, the Torah continues, "Then Moses said to Aaron, 'This is what the Eternal meant by saying, through those near to me I show myself holy and gain glory before all people.' Vayidom Aharon," and Aaron was silent. Given the face of this overwhelming tragedy, what are we to make of Aaron's silence? As Rabbi Aaron Levin teaches, this incident is made all the more tragic in our mind's eye when we confront that their deaths take place right in front of their father Aaron, who is left literally speechless. Much of our traditional commentary is uncomfortable with the notion that Aaron would see fault in God's actions. Rashbam writes that this silence was one of submissive acceptance. Or Rashi expounds that Aaron will go on to be rewarded for this virtuous silence. I am not only made uncomfortable by these readings, but believe they do a disservice to Aaron, the Israelites, and all of us who are too familiar with feelings of grief, devastation, and righteous indignation. Thankfully, the 13th century Rabbi Rambam was also unwilling to let God so easily off the hook, unwilling to let the lowest moment of Aaron's life be a mere footnote buried among the pages of ritual instructions. Like many of the commentators, Rambam asks, why does the Torah use the word vayidom as opposed to another word for fall silent, like vayishtok? He explains that vayidom is best translated as he became silent, and goes on to explain that this verb implies that his silence followed his initial crying aloud. Moses will quickly tell Aaron, there is no time to mourn, it is time to move on with the ritual. Nevertheless, Aaron, though astutely aware of the high stakes of anything but perfect and complete submission to God's will, cries, mourns, and makes clear this act of injustice is not okay and will not be glossed over before he becomes silent. Silence here is not the absence of dissent, but rather an affirmation that the dissent is so significant that Aaron refuses to carry on with business as usual, to maintain the status quo, to move right back into words. His silence makes clear that this is a moment that must be reckoned with. I vividly remember the day the Challenger exploded. Before the tears, before the overwhelming shock, there was silence. No one knew what had happened, and no one knew what to make of it. Then we spent the rest of the day watching it over and over and over again, almost becoming numb, but not really. It is just that the adults around us all too often did not have the words and did not know what to say. Vayidom, they were silent. So we did what we often did back then and almost immediately used our only tool for trauma response, and that was dark humor. By the next day, jokes were flying around the schoolyard that are best not shared among such wonderful company. The truth is, the world today, like the world back then, and even the world of Aaron, is not okay. There remain so many opportunities to be shocked and saddened by tragedy and violence, and all too often we simply do not know what to do or what to say. Sadly, for too many, the response is to immediately go on social media and immediately start posting. Not words of support, not words of pain, but instead words of accusation. As Allison Josephs wrote for The Jew in the City, unfortunately, too many people quickly run to not only explain why this happened, but to assign blame to certain types of sinners. But this does not have to be the way. As a people who are all too often blamed for most of the ills in the world, we feel this deep down in our kishkas. But this does not have to be the way. Out of tragedy can also come the possibility for hope. I could never imagine that after the Challenger disaster, 40 years later, we would be returning to the moon. Aaron probably could never have imagined that the sacrificial cult would continue on through his family, with the Beit Mikdash, the temple, ultimately being built in Jerusalem and being served by his very descendants. But perhaps most importantly, we can remind ourselves that even in the face of cruelty, intolerance, and inhumanity, there are so many good and righteous people in the world. As another children's television host, Fred Rogers, often recounted, my mother would say to me, look for the helpers. You will always find people who are helping. We are not going to solve the world's problems here in our sanctuary, though we certainly wish we could. But what we can do is learn from what our tradition has to say when we witness so many ongoing horrors in the world. We can remind ourselves that this is not normal. This is not okay. And we may be so overwhelmed that we, vayidom, are silent. But we also know how to elevate our voices out of the silence, And whether we need to process our feelings, become in touch with our stress responses, limit our time on social media, we should also remind ourselves that there is a community here where we can genuinely see and seek each other, where we can genuinely talk to each other, and where we can all process together. And no, I am not talking about any one particular tragedy or moment tonight. Just about how I know so many of us are feeling right now in this moment. And if we do this, we tap into all of this. May we be inspired instead to hear the words of Artemis II pilot Victor Glover, who said just a couple of days ago, I think for me, one of the really important personal perspectives that I have up here is I can really see Earth as one thing. When I read the Bible and I look at all the amazing things that were done for us, who were created, you have this amazing place, this spaceship. You guys are talking to us because we're in a spaceship really far from Earth, but you're on a spaceship called Earth that was created to give us a place to live in the universe, in the cosmos. When we have moments of darkness and silence, may we be inspired to remember that we're all on this spaceship Earth, a place unique among the cosmos, where we live in a time and a place to truly be able to appreciate God's creation. May we not be vaido, may we not be silent. Instead, use our words to elevate whatever we're feeling, but more importantly, to use our ears to listen and our eyes to see each other in this beautiful creation, even at moments such as these, and especially at moments such as these. May we find inspiration, may we find holiness, may we find hope, may we find community, may we find shalom, may we find peace. Yehi ratzon, be this God's will. Amen. Shabbat shalom.